In 1907, one man locked 40 bankers in a room. And by morning, he owned America. That man wasn't a president. He wasn't elected. He held no office. But when the entire American financial system was 48 hours from total collapse, the U.S. Treasury Secretary got on a train, traveled to New York, and begged this man for help. His name was J.P. Morgan. And what he did that night in November 1907 didn't just save the economy. It revealed something most people have never been told. See, here's what they teach you in school. Markets crash because of economic cycles, supply and demand. Natural corrections. That's the story. But there's another story. A darker one. One where crashes don't just happen. They're engineered. Where panics aren't random. They're profitable. And where a small group of people don't fear financial collapse, they orchestrate it. What I'm about to show you connects 5 dots across 200 years of financial history. The Panic of 1907, the Great Depression, the 1970s gold shock, the 2008 collapse, and something happening right now in 2025 that almost nobody is talking about. By the end of this video, you'll understand a pattern that reveals who really controls money, how crashes actually work, and the 3 psychological traps that keep 99% of people poor while a tiny elite grows richer with every disaster. But I need to warn you, once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. And some of what I'm about to tell you is going to make you very, very uncomfortable. Let's start with a murder. July 1912, the Titanic had sunk 3 months earlier, over 1,500 people dead, including 3 of the wealthiest men in America: Benjamin Guggenheim, mining fortune; Isidor Straus, owner of Macy's; John Jacob Astor IV, the richest man on the ship. Now here's what's interesting. All 3 men had one thing in common. They all opposed the creation of a central bank. A central bank that a group of powerful financiers had been trying to establish for years. Coincidence? Maybe. But let me tell you what happened next. 6 months after the Titanic sank, with its opposition now at the bottom of the Atlantic, a secret meeting took place. 10 men boarded a private rail car in New Jersey. They used first names only. They told reporters they were going duck hunting. They weren't. They were going to Jekyll Island, a private resort off the coast of Georgia. Owned by J.P. Morgan, for 9 days these men, representing 1/6 of the world's entire wealth, drafted a plan for a new institution. One that would control America's money supply, set interest rates, and have the power to create currency out of thin air. They called it the Federal Reserve. And here's the part that should make your blood run cold. The men who wrote the Federal Reserve Act were the same men who would profit from it. Paul Warburg, partner at Kuhn, Loeb & Co., Frank Vanderlip, president of National City Bank; Henry Davison, senior partner at J.P. Morgan; Benjamin Strong, who would become the Fed's first leader. This wasn't regulation. This was capture. The banks didn't get regulated by the government. The banks became the government. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like conspiracy theory, and I get it. But here's the thing about conspiracy theories. Sometimes they're theories, and sometimes they're just conspiracies. Let me prove it. Let's go back to 1907, before Jekyll Island, before the Federal Reserve, to understand what made that secret meeting necessary. In October 1907, a man named F. Augustus Hines tried to corner the copper market. He failed. His brokerage collapsed. And because his bank was connected to other banks, panic spread. People lined up outside banks demanding their money. Banks ran out of cash. The stock market crashed 50% in 3 weeks. The American economy was dying. And then something strange happened. J.P. Morgan, the most powerful banker in America, stepped in. He gathered the nation's top bankers in his private library. He locked the doors. And he didn't let anyone leave until they agreed to pool their money and stop the panic. Morgan personally decided which banks would live, which would die, which companies would be saved, which would be sacrificed. He wasn't elected. He wasn't appointed. But for 72 hours, J.P. Morgan was the American financial system. Now, here's the question nobody asks. Why did Morgan save the system? He was already the richest man in America. He could have let it burn and bought everything at pennies on the dollar. But he didn't. Why? Because Morgan understood something most people don't. Controlled chaos is more profitable than uncontrolled chaos. See, Morgan didn't just stop the panic. He used the panic. During those 72 hours, Morgan acquired Tennessee Coal and Iron Company, a major competitor to his U.S. Steel Corporation. He got it for $45 million. It was worth $700 million. President Roosevelt personally approved the deal because the alternative was total collapse. Morgan saved the system and made himself unimaginably richer in the process. But here's what Morgan realized that night. He was 70 years old. He wouldn't live forever. What would happen when the next panic came? Who would have the power to stop it? Or more importantly, who would have the power to profit from it? The answer was born on Jekyll Island 6 years later. The Federal Reserve, a system designed by bankers for bankers, with one incredible power, the power to create money. And that power would be used to engineer the greatest wealth transfer in human history, the Great Depression. Here's what they teach you about the Great Depression. The stock market crashed in 1929. Banks failed. People lost everything. It was a tragedy. Here's what they don't teach you. The crash was predictable. It was predicted. And certain people positioned themselves perfectly before it happened. Let me show you. In the summer of 1929, the stock market was at all-time highs. Everyone was buying. Shoeshine boys were giving stock tips. People were borrowing money on margin to buy more stocks. The Fed had been flooding the economy with cheap credit for years. And then, something changed. In August 1929, the Fed suddenly tightened. They raised interest rates. They reduced the money supply. At the same time, and this is documented, major financiers started selling. Bernard Baruch, advisor to presidents, liquidated his stock portfolio. Joseph Kennedy, father of JFK, sold everything and went to cash. John D. Rockefeller's banks began calling in loans. These men didn't just happen to sell at the top. They knew. How did they know? October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday. The market crashed 11% in a single day. Then came Black Monday, another 13%. Black Tuesday, another 12%. In 3 days, $30 billion in market value vanished. That's $500 billion in today's money. But here's what most people miss. The crash of 1929 wasn't the disaster. It was just the beginning. The real destruction came over the next 3 years. The market kept falling. From the 1929 peak to the 1932 bottom, the Dow lost 89% of its value. 89%. If you had $100,000 in stocks, you now had $11,000. But it gets worse. During this collapse, while average Americans were losing everything, the Fed did something inexplicable. They contracted the money supply by a third. When people needed cash the most, the Fed made cash scarce. Banks failed by the thousands. 11,000 banks closed. People lost their life savings, not because the economy couldn't recover, because someone wouldn't let it. Milton Friedman, Nobel Prize-winning economist, studied this for decades. His conclusion? The Fed didn't just fail to prevent the depression. The Fed caused it. They created the bubble with easy money. They popped the bubble by tightening. And they deepened the crisis by restricting money when it was needed most. Incompetence or something else? Let me read you something. Congressman Louis McFadden, chairman of the House Banking Committee, said this on the floor of Congress in 1932. It was not accidental. It was a carefully contrived occurrence. The international bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair here so that they might emerge as rulers of us all. McFadden introduced articles of impeachment against the Federal Reserve Board. 2 assassination attempts followed. He died mysteriously in 1936. Now, I'm not saying this proves anything. History is complicated. But here's what's not complicated: math. During the Depression, while stock values fell 89%, cash became king. And who had the cash? The same people who sold before the crash. The Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Baruchs. The Kennedys, they bought companies, real estate, entire industries. At 10 cents on the dollar, the Depression wasn't just a tragedy. It was a wealth transfer, from the many to the few, from the uninformed to the informed, from those who trusted the system to those who controlled it. And this exact pattern would repeat, again and again, for the next 100 years. Let me show you how the pattern evolved. In 1944, the global financial system was redesigned. The agreement was called Bretton Woods. Here's how it worked. The U.S. dollar would be backed by gold, $1.35 per ounce fixed rate. Every other currency will be pegged to the dollar. And America promised that any country holding dollars could exchange them for gold at any time. This made the dollar the world's reserve currency, the foundation of global trade, the most trusted money on earth. But there was a problem. America made a promise it couldn't keep. By the 1960s, the U.S. was printing far more dollars than it had gold to back them. The Vietnam War, the Great Society programs, spending without limits. Foreign governments noticed. France started demanding gold for their dollars. Then Germany, then Switzerland. A bank run was forming. Not on a single bank, on the entire United States. August 15, 1971, a Sunday evening, President Richard Nixon interrupted television programming across America, and in 15 minutes, he changed the world. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Temporarily. That was 54 years ago. What Nixon did that night was, in effect, a default. America broke its promise. The dollar was no longer backed by anything, just ... trust. And the paper that governments had been collecting for decades was now just ... paper. But here's what's remarkable. Nobody called it a default. Nobody called it theft. They called it closing the gold window. They called it monetary policy innovation. They called it the Nixon shock, the greatest financial betrayal in modern history, rebranded as economics. Now, watch what happened next, because this is where the psychology becomes terrifying. After Nixon closed the gold window, gold was no longer fixed at $35. It could trade freely. In 1971, $35 per ounce. By 1975, $175 per ounce. By 1980, $850 per ounce, a 24x increase in 9 years. The people who saw what was coming, who understood the Nixon shock, didn't just survive. They multiplied their wealth 24 times. Meanwhile, the average American holding dollars, their purchasing power was cut in half by inflation. The pattern repeated. Different decade. Same transfer. From the many to the few. From those who trusted to those who understood. Let me show you how this pattern reached its ultimate expression. In 2008, the financial system collapsed. You know the story. Subprime mortgage, Lehman Brothers, the bailouts. But there's a part of the story that most people have never heard. In 2006, 2 years before the crash, a small group of investors made a bet. They bet that the housing market would collapse, that mortgage-backed securities rated AA by ratings agencies were actually worthless, that the entire system was a fraud. Their bet paid off. One fund manager, John Paulson, made $15 billion in a single year. $15 billion. On a collapse that destroyed 10 million American jobs. Now, here's the question that should keep you up at night. How did Paulson know? How did he know in 2006 what the ratings agencies, the regulators, and the banks all claimed they couldn't see? Was he a genius? Or did he simply have access to information that others didn't? Let me show you something that will make you rethink everything. Goldman Sachs, one of the largest banks in the world, was selling mortgage-backed securities to their clients, telling them these were safe investments. At the same time, Goldman was betting against those same securities. They called it hedging. The SEC called it fraud. Goldman paid a $550 million fine. No one went to jail. But here's the real crime. When the system collapsed, who got bailed out? The banks. AIG, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Bank of America. $700 billion in taxpayer money. Then the Fed printed $4.5 trillion more. Where did that money go? Into the financial system, into asset prices, into stocks and bonds held primarily by the wealthy. From 2009 to 2019, the stock market went up 400%. The average American's wages went up 25%. That's not an accident. That's a transfer from Main Street to Wall Street, from the bailout payers to the bailout receivers. And now, in 2025, the same pattern is emerging again. But this time, the scale is almost incomprehensible. The U.S. national debt is $36 trillion. Annual interest payments alone are over $1 trillion. More than we spend on defense, more than we spend on Medicare. The math doesn't work. There are only three ways out. Default, which will collapse the global economy. Austerity, which no politician will accept. Or printing. Creating new money to pay old debts, which means inflation, which means the value of your savings ... dissolving, unless you know where to hide. Here's what I've learned studying 200 years of financial history. The game is rigged. But that doesn't mean you can't win. You just need to understand how the winners actually play. There are three positions, just three, that have survived every crisis I've described. Every panic, every crash, every transfer. These aren't complex strategies. They're not secret. They're hiding in plain sight. Position 1. Liquidity cash, treasury bills. The ability to act. J.P. Morgan saved the system in 1907 because he had liquidity when no one else did. Warren Buffett has $325 billion in cash right now, the largest position in Berkshire's history. He's not being conservative. He's being predatory. When the next crash comes, and it will come, he'll buy everything at discount. While everyone else is paralyzed by fear, he'll be shopping. Position 2. Sound money gold. The one asset that can't be printed. Central banks are buying gold at the fastest rate in 70 years. China, Russia, India, Poland, they see what's coming. The dollar's dominance is ending. Not today, not tomorrow. But inevitably, gold doesn't make you rich. Gold keeps you from becoming poor when the printing press runs. Position 3. Productive ownership, not paper. Not promises. Ownership in businesses that generate real earnings. The S&P 500 has survived every crisis, not because stocks don't fall. They fall hard, but because businesses adapt. They raise prices during inflation. They cut costs during recession. They innovate through disruption. Over any 20-year period in history, stocks have always recovered. Always. 3 positions. Cash to survive the crash and buy the bottom. Gold to survive the printing and preserve purchasing power. Stocks to survive the long-term and compound wealth. This isn't financial advice. This is pattern recognition. The same pattern that's worked for 200 years. But here's the twist. The thing I've been building toward this entire video. The 3 positions aren't the real secret. The real secret is psychological. See, most people will watch this video. They'll understand the pattern. They'll even agree with the positions. And they'll do ... nothing. Why? Because the system isn't just designed to take your money. It's designed to take your attention. Every financial crash follows the same emotional cycle. Euphoria at the top, when you're told to buy. Panic at the bottom, when you're told to sell. Recovery afterward, when you realize you did exactly the wrong thing. This cycle isn't a bug. It's a feature. The media, the analysts, the experts, they're not trying to help you. They're trying to keep you in the cycle. because the cycle is profitable. For them, the real secret isn't what to own. It's what to ignore. Ignore the noise. Ignore the predictions. Ignore the fear. Ignore the greed. The people who built generational wealth through every crisis in history did one thing. They stopped reacting. They positioned once. They held forever. They let the panics come and go. And they got richer while everyone else ran in circles. J.P. Morgan was once asked, "What will the market do?" His answer? It will fluctuate. That's it. That's the whole secret. Markets fluctuate, crashes come, panics happen. But across 200 years, 3 positions have survived them all. And the people who hold them don't predict the future. They prepare for it. The next crash is coming. It always is. The only question is, will you be the person who panics or the person who profits? In my next video, I'll show you the single document hidden in Federal Reserve archives that predicted the exact timing of the last 3 financial crises and what it's saying about 2026. Subscribe now, because that video might get taken down. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, I hear a very familiar rhythm.